Hello and welcome back to Every Last One, Every Last One. I read an interesting take online that almost every post-punk artist's best work was 1979 or 1980. While I'd agree many artists to emerge would put out some groundbreaking material in those years, many more would craft their best work throughout the next decade, and 1981 was a banner year. So stick around, because today we're going to discuss drawing straws to pick a lead vocalist, seeking lyrical inspiration from Gormenghast fantasy novels, and co-opting an old tune for a teen rom-com. This is Post-Punk Starter Pack 1981. Post-punk music is a fairly broad umbrella genre offshoot of punk rock that embraces greater ambition in terms of harmony, melody, rhythm, and lyrical content, while retaining punk energy and urgency. Prominent post-punk bands such as Gang of Four, Wire, Joy Division, The Smiths, Echo and the Bunnymen, Sonic Youth, and Fugazi helped set the stage for the alternative rock explosion of the 1990s. Post-punk bands often overlap with new wave artists. While the new wave genre is more closely linked to popular bands such as New Order, Depeche Mode, and Duran Duran, it shared many musicians with the post-punk scene. For instance, Joy Division is often referred to as post-punk, but following the death of singer Ian Curtis, the remaining musicians carried on as New Order, who would transition their sound throughout the 80s away from post-punk and towards new wave. Which brings us to our first record, New Order, Movement. Movement is the debut studio album by Manchester band New Order, released on the 13th of November, 1981 by Factory Records. Recorded less than a year after the suicide of their frontman Ian Curtis, the album is a continuation of the dark post-punk sound of Joy Division's material, with an increased reliance on synthesizers while still being prominently rooted in conventional rock structures. Upon release, the album wasn't particularly well received by critics or audiences, only peaking at number 30 on the UK albums chart. Whether due to this or just their own experimentation, the band would gradually shift to a more electronic sound over the course of the next year. During the summer of 1980, remaining Joy Division members Bernard Sumner, Peter Hook, and Stephen Morris elected to carry on, albeit under a new name, New Order. With the exception of the songs Ceremony and In a Lonely Place, all of the material the trio would be performing would be new. The remaining members would draw straws to determine who would take over as lead vocalist. Guitarist Bernard Sumner would draw the short straw. His vocals featured as lead on all but two of Movement's tracks. With the inclusion of Stephen Morris's girlfriend Gillian Gilbert on synths and guitar, the band would go back into the studio with Martin Hannett once again in the producing chair. Musically, Movement is a transitional album. There are clear glimmers of brilliance amid some droning post-punk dirges and dub-sounding experiments. Opener Dreams Never End is a classic, sounding a little reminiscent of their song Ceremony. Just two chords and Hooky doing his best Ian Curtis impression over a classic Stephen Morris drum track. 4 years later, Robert Smith would release his own version, whether by accident or as tribute, as the Cure song In Between Days. New Order and The Cure would go back and forth releasing versions of each other's songs throughout the 80s. Maybe I'll do a video on it someday. The song Truth very much sounds like a leftover from Joy Division's Closer album, a prominent hooky bass line, and Barney's detuned Solina string machine, only here performed over a lightweight drum machine rhythm. Doubts Even Here is my favorite off of Movement. Like a little brother to Decades, again off of Closer, the aged synth string and 3-note guitar and bass intonations ride the wave of the propulsive tom heavy beat. Every so often, there's an electronic crash effect to break the tension. Here the vocals again are sung by Hook. He intones, "In my mind, thoughts are becoming clearer. I'm watching every move you make. Counting time spent in observation, a single blow, a false mistake." In the many years since its release, retrospective reception to Movement has been very positive, with both fans and reviewers praising the album as a middle ground between the dark sounds of Joy Division and the alternative dance New Order would begin to cultivate on Power, Corruption, and Lies. This is a repress. Spanish pressing. Lavish definitive edition box set. It's got this incredible book here. Tons of photos and the gear they used. Archival stuff like lyrics and awards. And the definitive edition repress. Next record, the Psychedelic Furs. Talk, Talk, Talk. Talk, Talk, Talk is the second studio album by English rock band the Psychedelic Furs, released on the 15th of May 1981 by Columbia Records. Strange as it may now seem, there was a time when the Psychedelic Furs seemed better placed than U2 to emerge from punk as the UK's leading contemporary rock act. It didn't quite work out that way, but they did enjoy headline success in the United States and pretty much decamped there for a while as a result. Founded in London in early '77, the Furs rose out of the punk movement, famously using a vacuum cleaner as additional instrumentation at a show at the Roxy after Richard Butler and his two brothers attended a Sex Pistols gig at the 100 Club Festival. The Furs would eventually come together as a sextet after several name changes and extensive touring to work with producer Steve Lillywhite on their self-titled debut in March 1980. After this initial success, the Furs would decide to solely work with Steve Lillywhite, introducing a brighter, poppier side over a series of albums to their underground rock edge. Opener Dumb Waiters, with its slow tempo and heavy sax and guitars, can initially feel quite disorienting. I read one reviewer describe this one as queasy, and in a way, it does feel kind of like the bad after effects of a good night out. At the same time, it's very memorable, a unique moment on an album that on the whole is pretty bright. Pretty in Pink is the band's best known song and biggest hit, due to its inspiration for and association with the John Hughes film of the same name. Molly Ringwald was a huge fan of the Furs, and she played the song to John Hughes and said, quote, "You should make a film based on this." Speaking on a recent podcast, Ringwald additionally revealed that an impromptu dance with her friend Matt Freeman, who was the inspiration for the character Ducky, further inspired Hughes. She said, quote, "John Hughes would always take us kids to Kingston Mines, a club in Chicago. I was dancing with Matt, but it was this extended version that went on for 20 minutes. Based on the interaction of me and Matt on the dance floor, that's what made John write Pretty in Pink and my character." Speaking on the lyrical subject matter, Richard Butler recalled, quote, "The song is about a girl who sleeps around a lot and thinks that she's popular because of it. It makes her feel empowered somehow and popular, and in fact, the people that she's sleeping with are laughing about her behind her back and talking about her." He would also add, "I'm really lazy with lyrics. The lyrics were probably half written. Then we came up with ideas. I remember having charts on the walls of what we had to have recorded for each song. I would invariably try to leave the vocals to last because I was recording. At the end of the day, Steve would say, "Oh, we're doing Pretty in Pink tomorrow." So I'd have to go away and make sure I had all the lyrics together. Into You Like a Train is a fast-paced ride full of chugging guitars and sax accompaniment. This song was slated at the time by critics with objections to sexism in the lyrics, especially the line, "I don't want to give you flowers, I just want to sleep with you." Original pressing. Repress. Inner sleeve. Includes this massive Psychedelic Furs poster. Next record, Echo and the Bunnymen, Heaven Up Here. Heaven Up Here is the second album by English post-punk band Echo and the Bunnymen, released on the 29th of May 1981 by Korova Records. Following their more psychedelia-based debut Crocodiles, Echo and the Bunnymen returned in 1981 with the darkest and perhaps most experimental album of their career. Working with producer Hugh Jones, the Bunnymen crafted a record best enjoyed as a whole, building up these atmospheric blends of gloom and menace across 11 tracks. Heaven Up Here lacks the signature hooks and melodies that would later make the Bunnymen famous, showcasing instead a dirge-like songwriting approach built around the circular rhythms of bassist Les Pattinson and drummer Pete DeFreitas. In this setting, the band remarkably flourishes, although they would eventually hit greater heights by scaling a bit back on Heaven Up Here's extremism. Third song, Over the Wall, is a standout, functioning as a release valve to the triptych of the first 3 tracks. It opens with some deep bass and this thick, crunchy synth that's black as night. Ian McCullough declares, "I'm walking in the rain to end this misery. I'm walking in the rain to celebrate this misery over this guitar cacophony and these pummeling tom rolls." This is miles from the later Bunnymen's pop sensibilities, but not unlike a bit of the earliest U2 or another band which we're going to talk about next. Fifth track, A Promise, provides a bit of reprieve with these hooky guitar riffs over top Les Pattinson's highly melodic bass playing. Ian McCullough's vocals are completely top tier here as he wails, "There's a light on the water, a promise," bathed in reverb, while the band take turns highlighting their individual parts around him. Eighth song, All My Colors, is almost folky in its layered acoustic jangle and background percussive hits before a big guitar melody joins the fray. A live favorite, this one ends with a fade just as the melodies intertwine here, but in concert continues to greater heights. This is a repress. Inner sleeve. Next record, The Sound from the Lion's Mouth, the best post-punk band that most people have never heard of. From the Lion's Mouth is the second studio album by English post-punk band The Sound, released in November 1981, also by record label Korova. While never commercially successful, The Sound have been long championed by critics and, over the decades, a growing cult audience. I first discovered them years ago while traveling in Scandinavia. After hours of searching around Stockholm for a decent bar to spend a Saturday night, I finally happened upon this hole-in-the-wall basement club covered in posters of all my favorite bands from the 70s and 80s. Sometime around 3 a.m. as the lights came on, the last song they played was Counting the Days, and I was hooked. Fronted by Adrian Borland, The Sound formed from the remnants of his previous band, The Outsiders. The group also included Graham Bailey on bass, By Marshall on keyboards, and Mike Dudley on drums. After a favorable NME review and appearance on John Peel, they would release their debut Jeopardy in 1980. It was lauded by critics upon its release, but fared poorly commercially, failing to chart in the UK. For their sophomore album, the sound worked with producer Hugh Jones. See the connections with the Bunnymen? They would also sub in new keyboardist Colvin Mayers. Sounding like that missing link between Joy Division and Echo and the Bunnymen, From the Lion's Mouth is a harrowing tightrope walk of post-punk passion and tension over its 10 tracks. Opener Winning sounds super triumphant, and you can't help but feel it's a statement on Borland's reported personal battles with mental health in the face of overwhelming obstacles. The sheer defiance in the song's chorus, here he sings, "I was going to drown, then I started swimming. I was going down, then I started winning." The fire is driven by Graham Greene's melodic bass playing and some excellent jangly guitar from Borland that evokes Gang of Four among other contemporaries. Here he sings, "I'm a willing victim of circumstance. I can't change a thing. I can't take the chance." This is certainly one of Lion's more intense moments, and I just love the fever pitch that things conclude on. Wish I could have gotten to experience these songs live. Skeleton's intro sounds suspiciously like possibly what U2 were spinning just before writing New Year's Day 2 years later. The driving momentum of the rhythm section here is infectious, and during the second verse, this incredible piano riff joins in, pushing things into another excellent chorus. All of the ancillary guitar flourishes, these tom hits, this off-key piano accent, it's all super atmospheric, and the more I play this one, the more I appreciate these subtleties. We're living like skeletons. Like their debut, From the Lion's Mouth was critically acclaimed, but failed to capture the attention of the public, with the band's fan base limited to a cult following. But like other unsung heroes that would go on to receive attention decades later, there's been a greater awareness for the sound that I've noticed over the past 5 years. For my part, if I can get you to check out one record today, make it this one. This is a repress. Inner sleeve. Orange. Final record today, The Cure, Faith. Faith is the third studio album by English rock band The Cure, released on the 17th of April, 1981 by Fiction Records. The album's cover, designed by former and future member Pearl Thompson, is a veiled picture of the church Bolton Priory in the fog. This album would see The Cure delve deeper into the gloomy and atmospheric soundscapes they introduced on their sophomore record 17 Seconds, amping up the funereal feel of the music and despondent vocal delivery. Much of Faith was written in the studio. Lal Tolhurst was quoted as saying, "We had been on the road constantly, switching between recording an album and touring. On Faith, the band would try out an exhausted list of studios to perfectly capture these recordings. Robert Smith was obsessed with the idea of the album evoking the sound of a big church. He would scrap numerous early demos and test out different reverbs, flangers, and chorus effects in an attempt to get the songs to sound less dull and more atmospheric. At least 2 songs on the album, All Cats Are Grey and The Drowning Man, were inspired by the Gorman Gass novels of Mervyn Peake. Faith was also notable as being the first record by The Cure to feature a 6-string bass guitar and more prominent use of keyboards. Thematically, Faith perfectly conveys the period of adolescence when you are still a teenager but you have almost passed into adulthood. Misunderstanding, longing, doubt and loneliness, questions to yourself and others, setting your own values and existential thoughts. Primary is especially painful with its calls of Oh Remember, Oh Please Don't Change. Musically, it submerges you in these flange-heavy, dueling basses. It's a thrashy, melodic post-punk classic that bursts with youthful energy. Robert sings, "The further we go, the older we grow, the more we know, the less we show." Still one of my favorite early Cure lyrics. You can really hear the influence that Joy Division was having on the group in the outro when the crash hits, then hits again slower, and then even slower. Brilliant. The next track is a must for any great Halloween playlist. The first 20 seconds of Other Voices evokes the feeling of walking around a cemetery with the sense of uneasiness. It introduces all these little rattles and percussive hits, this rising effect, and these warbling voice tones that sound otherworldly. Then Simon Gallup's bass guitar enters, here mixed super loud as the lead instrument, giving way to Robert's big wail. Robert sings, "Pounding in my broken head, commit the sin, commit yourself," and all the other voices said, "Change your mind, you're always wrong." While themes of alienation are present here, I also interpret this song as being about mental health. All Cats Are Grey floats along with this calm and misty feeling. The music here features Smith swapping out his usual guitar for keyboard and piano, and does a great job of evoking the gray on gray shadows and angles on rocks of being in a cave. Robert sings, "In caves all cats are gray. In caves, the textures coat my skin. In the death cell, a single note rings on and on and on." And then things pivot into this outro that's so minimal and gorgeously ambient. Mike Hedges did an incredible job with the subtle layering here, and that fade out to just the low, ominous piano, a perfect callback to the final sound off of their previous album. The Funeral Party is my favorite off the album, and one of my all-time favorite Cure songs. It's hard to choose what I love most. The lush, phased sound of the Roland string machine, the prominent bass groove that probably evokes Twin Peaks and Julie Cruz's Falling for many listeners. Robert's perfect lyrics really make it for me here. The feeling of being young and out of place, unsure how to feel about the surreal passing of a grandparent, surrounded by all these adults. Two pale figures ache in silence, timeless in the quiet ground, side by side in age and sadness. In a 1983 interview, Smith crystallized the emotions behind the song's lyrics. Quote, "When someone you know dies, you suddenly realize what death is. Something takes shape in your mind. It's not an indefinite, abstract entity anymore. Even if my parents are still alive, I could understand. It opened my eyes. You face great challenges." While Faith initially divided critics upon its release, it's gone on to be considered one of the Cure's early gems and a dark gothic favorite right up there with Disintegration and Pornography. Its rich atmospheric sounds and gloomy despondency have made it a personal favorite I've returned to over and over with great fondness. This is a repress, vinyl lovers edition. Inner sleeve, All Cats Are Grey. Original Japanese pressing, Japanese lyric sheet, and this is primary 12-inch. So that's going to do it for today. I'm going to link my previous post-punk 1980 videos down in the description, so go check those out too. If you enjoyed this video, kindly give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the dozen or so post-punk videos that I've got planned. Are you familiar with all of the records I covered? What are your favorite post-punk albums of 1981 or of all time? Let me know down in the comments, as well as if you'd like to see a part 2 to this list, and I'll be sure to include this classic. Thanks for watching. You can see more of my videos right here. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you guys in the next one.